30 projections in 30 days going into the 2024 regular season for the New York Mets as we continue our month-long deep dive into the Mets' 40-man roster. Today's video is about Jeff McNeil. Finishing with the National League batting title in 2022, the Mets extended McNeil to a 4-year, $50 million contract last offseason. But in 2023, McNeil struggled a lot at the plate, slashing .270, .333, .378 with 10 home runs and a even 100 weighted runs created plus in 648 plate appearances. As one of Major League Baseball's anomaly hitters, McNeil was far from himself in 2023, specifically with his pitch selection, with his chase rate landing in the 39th percentile at a career worst 30% clip. Although he always overperforms expected metrics, for the first time in his career, McNeil's quality of contact registered worse results than the actual results in a down year. Also recording a career low in pulled line drive rate and pulled fly ball rate, McNeil recorded career worse with a 612 OPS versus fastballs and a 694 OPS versus breaking balls. As a utility player, McNeil's defense at second base and outfield remained a plus 1.7 defensive run value overall. Towards the end of the season, McNeil underwent an MRI that showed a partial UCL tear in his left elbow. In result, McNeil received a PRP injection in his elbow and did not undergo surgery over the offseason. The effect the injury had to his performance is still unknown, but McNeil is expected to be fully healthy for spring training. McNeil will be entering a 32-year-old season, lined up to be the Mets' starting second baseman on opening day.
You know what Jeff McNeil is? If he's not hitting for batting average, he's a useless player in today's game. That's just a fact of life. Yeah. Last year you saw, 270. Again, that's still a solid for most players, but Jeff McNeil, especially in this lineup, if he's playing in a different lineup, it's not that big a deal if you got a bunch of power hitters around the Atlanta Braves. He'd be fine in those type of lineup, but in this type of lineup where there is absolutely no power besides 2, maybe 3 guys, and you got a bunch of these table setters or one outcome, however the hell you want to call him, he's just another guy. He just does the batting average better than everyone of those so-called one outcome guys. What I've prayed is, I miss the days, and I'll tell my kids about 2019 Jeff McNeil, where somehow that man hit 23 home runs. Juice ball or not, ending up with this gerbil hitting 23 balls over the fence. God, get me back to those days. He's another year older. Unlike past years, he's got some competition again coming internally of, hey, if he struggles again, you're going to hear some calls for certain prospects. And yes, are those guys the same thing? Yeah, they're just younger. The downside of Jeff, again, he's age 32. Yes, he signed that contract. How much more are we going to get this elite bat to ball, pure generational Luis Ariz BS? The clock's going to strike midnight. You just hope it's coming a couple of years from now. But again, in this lineup, he's not as valuable as other people. And again, if he's a fine player. Again, if this lineup was built better, we would have a lot less problems with him. But it's just the fact that this team and how light this power hitting team is, he's kind of the main culprit.
There was, no excuse for why he had the bad year this year, because when we look at, like you said, average 270, when you still have the OPS plus of under 100 and the OPS of like barely above 700, it's just the totality just wasn't very effective. On base percentage wasn't great. So he didn't do many things well at all offensively. Defensively, he was still the same guy playing second, playing the outfield. So this is a big year for him, especially like I said, those prospects coming up. If they're going to be more productive in any way, because, one of those, actually what both those guys give you in Jet and Acuna is the fact they can steal bases, so at least, once they're getting on base, at least, if you're going to be a singles hitter or a one base player, whether you're drawing a walk, getting hit by pitch or single, if you're just staying at first, you're only doing so much. But in a guy like Jet Williams who draws a walk, then steals second, at least he's in scoring position. At least it counts more like a double than it does a single. So for McNeil, I think there's a scenario where, let's just say that even if he is struggling and a Jet or Acuna comes up, I could still see him becoming an outfielder if Marte or Bader or both get hurt. So I think that no matter what, you're going to see Jeff McNeil on this team. If he's healthy, he's going to be playing quite a lot. And it's just a matter of being the player that he's been in the past, whether it's 2019 McNeil, whether it's 2022 McNeil. If you want the power from him, he did it as a leadoff hitter. He did it leading off games. Like we were talking about in the Brand Nimmo episode, first pitch of games, home run. If he's batting, what's he going to bat this year? We've talked about it constantly. Is he going to bat third? Is he going to bat fifth, seventh, ninth? Like, who knows what his role is going to be on this team? And I think that, he's going to have to try to find a role and, decide where, like, okay, this is how I'm going to impact the team, depending on where he's hitting in the order. So I think, there's going to be a lot of different factors that go into it. I think health is going to be a big part of it, because if Marte's healthy, he's at the top of the lineup probably. So I think that there's like a lot of different pieces that are going to decide what his role is and just how he kind of fits with the team overall.
It's very weird for Jeff McNeil because the left UCL tear, it's hard to know whether it affected his hitting or not. But overall, I think he just did not comfortable at all in 2023. Like, it just was not a great year for him offensively. He just was not the same hitter. And I think the main problem with McNeil is that he is at his best when he is pulling line drives, when he is on top of the baseball, when he is lifting the baseball. And he just wasn't doing that he's usually doing at his usual career. And that's the problem, what you were seeing last year. And the last 3 years, it's just, although it has a batting title sewed up on it, you really haven't seen that the past 3 years in totality with Jeff McNeil. You've just really seen just a very weird hitter who has just kind of like screwed up the identity of what he is. And I don't know if it's getting to his head or whatever, but it's just, the problem is that what he is as a player, it's just not something that fits into this lineup. And we've talked about this all the time. And, we are going to go into this year with him as the starting second baseman once again. Regarding any injury, regarding any discomfort that he has, we are going to see Jeff McNeil as the starting second base. Now, what are we going to get? I'm really not sure. To be honest, I don't know how much, with his hitting profile and how unadaptable it has been to the last few years of baseball, it's hard to figure out what he's actually going to do next season and what his contributing is going to be, because like we have said before, if he ain't batting 300, he's not doing anything for this lineup offensively consistently and helping this team win. So unless he contends for another batting title, you might have to talk about an uncomfortable thing for a lot of Mets fans about his future with this team. Of course, him being a homegrown player, it might be a little bit hard, but you might have to consider a change going forward from Jeff McNeil going into his 30s, where we all talk about he is probably not going to be getting any better in his career. I want to remind everybody that projections are not predictions. They are benchmarks of the player's current specific percentile outcome based on predictive data and results. For my projections, I decided to use, in my opinion, each player's 75th percentile outcome. A majority of projections are usually from the 50th percentile outcome. I personally wanted to have a median between sustainability and upside. You also get a decent look as to who I am high on and who I am low on going into the next season. As for McNeil, 559 plate appearances, slashing 275, 333, 392, with 6 home runs, 52 runs batted in, a 104 weighted runs created plus, and a wins above replacement of 2.4.
Pretty spot on. Again, 275 batting average, 725 OPS. That's kind of what he is. The 52 RBIs. I mean, he's going to be an RBI situation and hitting probably in that 5 or 6 spot. So 52 RBIs isn't a great number. But again, when you're kind of that, he's not driving ball over the fence, like he's got 6 homers as his projection. So again, that's kind of, again, at age 32, for him, you need the batting average higher. But that just seems kind of what we saw from last year and maybe going into this year. Kind of a spot on one.
It's really hard with Jeff McNeil, just as a hitter in general, because sometimes he outperforms things, sometimes he underperforms things, not to mention what he's sustained throughout his career. It's really hard to project that with the batted ball data that he has. He's just a very, very hard hitter to evaluate overall projecting into the next year, because it's not the fact that you know what you're going to get. It's just identifying his strengths and weaknesses and how that's going to sustain, it's really hard to look at Jeff McNeil. That's just how he's been his entire career.
He's another one where there's quite a dip in plate appearances. So again, like we talked about, that could be due to injury, that could be due to young players maybe taking some of the playing time.
Joey Wendell's also nipping at his heels. Let's not.
Oh, of course. I mean, yeah, you got former All-Star Joey Wendell in the mix now too. So Joey Wendell is going to be our starting third baseman and starting second baseman with the way you feel about Beatty and McNeil. So that's going to be very interesting for him to pull double duty in that aspect. Might as well just have him and Lindor in the infield, and that's basically it. They'll just kind of play all the positions. So, with Jeff, the numbers are very similar to this past season. I think the home runs, they could be a little higher, honestly. 6 is pretty low because even in 2021 where he missed some time, he still had 7. And you've seen slowly a bit of an increase, ever since, after 19, but there's been a slow increase, steady increase. So we'll see what kind of hitter it becomes. I think that overall it's if he's barely above average, that's a big drop off compared to what he's capable of. When you're looking at 2019 McNeil, when you're looking at 2018 McNeil, even though 2018, 2020, even though they were shortened seasons, he was always that 130 or above bat. So to go all the way down to 104, even though it's an improvement from last year, it's still just not the Jeff McNeil that's effective. So I think that if that's the case, you're looking at a guy who really becomes more of a full-time utility man or traded if he has a season like that.
Yeah, that brings me into my follow-up question with Jeff McNeil. If he were to give you this exact stat line that I just presented to you, is this where you start considering to move on from him? Now, I know we have talked about this before, obviously, but from a technical term, if you're David Stearns and you see this type of production, is this where you have a few prospects in your system, whether you like it or not, you're high on them or not, they have a lot of upside? Is this where you take a look at this type of production, whether, he's a sub-2 win player or not? Is this where you start to cut the cord, and this is where you're like, okay, maybe it's time to move on from Jeff McNeil?
What you're getting out of McNeil is at least the league average bat. So I would have to have seen some sort of ABs out of Acuna or Jet to make that decision. Again, it should have been fucking shipped out of here a long time. But also, you do get Ronnie Mauricio back next year. So, I mean, if he does suck, you sign a third baseman, you shift him to second, and boom, there you go. You got a bada boom, boom, bang power, and you have your problem solved. But, again, I would have to have seen at least a sample of the kids to be like, all right, they've either shown enough, shown in a small sample, okay, I can trust that, and I got 2 of them. Or, again, you get the Beatty situation, like, oh, you're banking on the prospect, and they all suck, and at least you traded a league average bat away. So there's that, you have to kind of play that both sides.
The other thing that's going against Jeff too is that he'd be going into an age 33 season at that point, and it's the value, if the value just continues to decrease, it gets those points where we talk about things like asset management. You can't let the value continually decrease. You do run that risk. So like Andrew said, if you get anything from the prospects, it definitely is a lot more likely because we've always talked about you want to trade McNeil, but you also need to replace McNeil. So if you have that internally. And again, if the value is just not there and you could get something that fits your team better, whether that's pitching, whether that's a young outfielder with some raw athleticism that has power upside, maybe something like that. Like Andrew's talking about trade them for 3 prospects, a couple have some high ceilings or things like that. You could try to look at some of those kind of deals because just make more sense. If there was a team that kind of Andrew was saying could benefit more from this kind of player than the Mets could, since they already have a lot of this type of player already, then you can kind of make a move that's beneficial for both sides.